Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to be wrapping up the books that I read in April. But before we do that, I just want to make a quick announcement. So a couple weeks ago, I announced on my YouTube channel that I was starting a podcast. You may have seen that video, you may have not have, but I did want to let you know that podcast, which is called Digging Deeper in the Bible with Letty, the first episode is now live. You can find it on Spotify. I'll put the link below, or you can just search it. The cover art looks like this, and we're just going to be taking topics and subjects and looking at the Bible to see what it has to say on those subjects, looking at verses in the Old and New Testament, and then talking about how it applies to us and what the Bible says about how we should handle those subjects. So yeah, I'm really excited about it, and I hope that maybe you guys are too. I have been praying that the Lord will bring this podcast to the people who need to hear it, and who it can help strengthen their relationship with Him. And so yeah, I just hope it brings Him glory. But I did want to announce it, and I will put the link to the first episode in the description box below. Okay, now that announcement is out of the way, we can go ahead and get to our video. Like I said, this is my April reading wrap-up video. I actually read 11 books in April, although I had like at least 4 more that I had started and not finished. In the middle of the month, I got into like this huge like reading slump. I was just in a mood and I could not find the right book, and so it's like the 4 that I haven't finished, I'm not even calling them DNFs. One might be considered a DNF because I just couldn't get into it, but honestly I kept just starting books and then not being in the mood for them, and then so like I'd move on to the next one. So it's not even like I didn't like it and stopped reading on purpose. It was just like for some reason I was in like a really specific mood and I was just looking for something specific. So actually at that time in the month I had I think 7 books or so that I had started and not finished because I was looking for something really specific. And then once I got out of that mood, I went back to the ones that I had started and I started reading through them. So I finished a couple, but now at the end of the month, there's still 4 that I technically started and didn't finish. But I'm not calling them DNFs because I literally just was looking for a specific mood read and I couldn't find it. Anyway. So that aside, let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, we have 11 books to go over today. So the first book that I read this month was an Erica Vetsch book. I actually have 3 Erica Vetsch. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Erica Vetsch books on here. So in my 24 reading prompt that I did at the beginning of the year, I had one Erica Vetsch book on there because she was one of the new authors that I wanted to try this year. One of my reading goals this year was to try 6 new authors, and I wanted her to be one of them because I'd heard good things about her. And the one book of hers that's on my 24 and 24 list, I didn't even get to this month. I literally went to my local library, one of them. I have several local libraries that I kind of visit. But the one that I went to, the first one I went to this month, I just went up to the fiction section and I went to her last name area and there were 2 books on the shelf there, and so I took them off to give them a try for her to be a new author, and I really liked them both. So I ended up reading a 3rd book of hers this month, which was towards the end of the month, and I'll get to that later. But yeah, I definitely want to read more of her because it was really good. So the first book on my list is The Cactus Creek Challenge by Erica Vetsch, which I gave 4 stars, and I was actually kind of surprised to give this one 4 stars because it was the description was they live in this town called Cactus Creek, and every year it's historical fiction and it's a prairie town. Every year they do this challenge where people switch jobs for a month, but this year, for the first year, they're allowing women in the challenge, so women and men are going to be switching jobs. So there's 2 couples. There's the main couple, she's the school teacher and he is the sheriff, and their names get drawn to switch jobs, and she's so excited because she's had this crush on him since childhood, and he just kind of sees her as a child and not grown up. So she's like, yes, I'll do his job well and he'll see me as an adult. But he is not excited because he's this young girl cannot be sheriff for a month. There are crimes here. And then there's a second couple, which he's the livery owner, and she's she's a town baker, and they have to switch jobs. And they have a secondary storyline, which is really sweet and really cute. I like their storyline a lot. But I also really like the main couple storyline. And I wasn't sure, because when I read that description, I was like, oh, that sounds like really, really cheesy. And it was a little cheesy, but it's also just really light and fun, and it made me laugh, and I really enjoyed it. Like, it also had a really cheesy looking cover, I'm not gonna lie. I try not to be influenced by covers I see, but sometimes I see a cover and I just feel so, like, turned off by, like, the cheesiness of it. And this one, I think it's pretty cheesy, but I gave it a chance anyway, and actually really, really liked it, which is just proof that you should not judge a book by its cover, literally. So I did give it 4 stars, and yeah, it was really, really cute, and it was definitely a good start for Erica Vetsch as an author. I was like, yeah, I could definitely read more of her. Which brings me to my next book, which is the second book that I picked up at the library that day. And it was My Heart Belongs in Fort Bliss, Texas by Erica Vetsch. And this one I only gave 3 stars. I didn't like it quite as much as Cactus Creek. I think if I had read them like in reverse order, then I would not have been as tempted to pick up Cactus Creek, because My Heart Belongs in Fort Bliss, like, it was good. It had its moments. There are 2 cute little kids in it, and they're nice. So it follows... There is a woman, and she's an artist for, like, a catalog. She lives in the city. I forget which city. Some city back east. And she gets word that her brother and his wife have died. Her brother's in the army, and she, like, hates the army because her father was also in the army, and it kind of ruined the relationship with her father and her mother, because her father, you know, being bound to the army, like, was constantly moving them and constantly going out on patrol, and her mother got really bitter about it and felt like the army took her husband away from her. Then so after he died, her mother just got really, really bitter. And so she's always hated the army, but her brother's been in the army, and he's been stationed at this like little desert fort in West Texas, and so in like Indian territory. And so when she receives word that her brother and his wife has died, she goes out to the fort to take custody of her niece and nephew, but she finds them already in the custody of her brother's wife's brother, so her sister-in-law's brother, who is an officer in the army. He's a doctor, and so he is stationed at the fort as well. And so she is like, no, this can't happen. I'm not going to let my niece and nephew be raised in army life. I'm taking them back to the city with me. And he's like, no, my sister left them in my care. And she's like, well, there was nothing in that. My brother never said anything about that. He would want me to have them. And so they have like a little custody battle of wills, so to speak, which of course turns into romance, because this is a romance, so you expect that. But yeah, I just didn't like it as much. It was a little slow, and it didn't have the humor that Cactus Creek had. And so, I mean, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. It just didn't blow me away. So I'm glad that I read them in the order that I did, because if I had read Fort Bliss first, then I probably wouldn't have been as tempted to go on with Erica Vetsch books more. But because I read Cactus Creek first, and it just really made me smile, and I really enjoyed it, especially when I wasn't expecting much from it, I'm glad that I went on. So yes. So next I read A Warrior's Heart by Misty and Beller. And this is a book that I was going back and forth between my brother's house at the beginning of the month, and so I needed an audiobook for the car for me and my mom. So this is the first book in the Brides of Laurent, I believe. And it was interesting. I gave it 3 stars. There's like this town that's buried into the mountains in somewhere in Canada. It's like a French village, and they have buried themselves in the mountains to be away from civilization, and they protect themselves, and they don't like Englishmen because there was like a massacre like 10 years before where like a group of Englishmen came to their village, and they were like, oh, strangers, let's offer them hospitality, but the men just attacked them out of nowhere and killed like most of the men in the village were off on a hunt, so they killed like several of the women and children for like no reason. So now after that, the village got really like self-protective. And so the main girl, she is the like head of the little village army, so to speak. I think they call them like the guards. She's like the captain of the guards. And she's on patrol one day when she sees this white man coming through the woods. And so she shoots him with an arrow that knocks him unconscious. Like it's her arrow is like dipped in a sleeping potion or drought. And she shoots him with it to knock him unconscious and basically takes him to their prison and is like, we don't trust Englishmen. I'm not going to let you know until we know what your purposes are. And it's the War of 1812. So he is on a scout for the U.S. Army, and he's gone to look for like this mineral that's supposed to be explosive with the right chemicals. My mom and I were guessing it's probably some ingredient to like TNT or something. We're not really sure exactly when TNT was invented, but from what it was described, that's the best we can guess, that it was like probably an ingredient of TNT that they were looking for. They thought it would help end the war. But because he's like basically a spy gone to look for this, he's sworn by the government not to reveal it. So he's like keeping that close to his chest. So they have that going on. And it was an interesting book. And I did kind of like their dynamic. But to be honest, like I couldn't suspend my disbelief that much with it. Like this whole idea, like, if it was like set in like medieval times or something, I would have been so on board with the whole idea of this hidden town in a nation, which in the mountains with its own little people group. But the idea of this happening in like 1812, I don't know, it just seemed too like modern to me. And maybe it could have happened in that time period, but it just felt like by the 19th century, there was more exploration going on and there was just more knowledge. And it just, the idea of this like whole little city nation or city group being so hidden away that they didn't know what was going on, because they didn't know that America was a country. They didn't know about modern conveniences. Like they were just so hidden away. They had been there for like 100 years. I don't know. I just couldn't get on board with it, I guess. And I have debated whether or not I'll read the rest of the series. I might, but it's not high on my priority list. I only gave this one 3 stars, and I literally only gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I just couldn't seem to get on board with that idea of this group hidden away. Also, they've been there 100 years, and they're a pretty small group, and I just kept thinking, like, they have got to be really, really, like, crossbred by now. Like, she kept saying, like nobody ever leaves or comes to their group. Like they've been the same families for 100 years. And so she kept saying like, oh, you know, it's fine. We grow up and we get married and we repopulate. And I was like, okay, but if you've been doing this, she said at one point that their group was like, I don't know. I want to say 100 people, but that might be different. They've definitely been there for 100 years. Maybe that's the 100 I'm thinking of. She does say at one point how big their group was, but and when she said how big her group was, my mom and I both looked at each other in the car and we're like, shouldn't there be incest by now? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I was just like, I feel like there's a problem there. But anyway, so yeah, I only gave that one 3 stars just because I was like, I just couldn't get on board with the believability of it. Like, I know that we suspend our disbelief in fiction, but I just couldn't seem to suspend it that much. But it's weird because I feel like if this had been in a different setting, like if it had been in like a medieval setting or like I would have been way more on board with this. But I don't know, somehow in the setting that it was in, it just seemed out of place to me. But that's just me. Okay, so after 2 3-star books, I was in the mood for... Actually, this is about the time that I was like really, really moody and couldn't decide what to read. And this is when I kept starting things and not finishing them. And like I said, I had like 7 books started that I just wasn't in the mood for. So what I did was I went back and reread an old favorite, which was Whispers from the Shadows by Roseanna M. White. It's an old favorite of mine. It's 5 stars. And I was like, I just want a comfort read because I can't decide what I'm in the mood for. So I went back for this one and I read it. 5 stars. I love it. That's all I'm going to say on it because it's not new. It's definitely a reread for me. And so after that one, I went and read the novella which follows Whispers from the Shadows, which is called A Hero's Promise. And it's also 5 stars to me. It's really short. It's just a little short story that comes between the second and third book in the Culper Ring series, but I like it a lot. The characters make me happy, so I reread it. After that, I got some books from the library again. I got A Love Discovered by Tracie Peterson. And I used to read, like when I was in high school, I read Tracie Peterson like constantly. I mean, I was always getting her books from the library. But I feel like I've been on like a dry spell of Tracie Peterson. Like, I can't remember the last, like I know I read a couple books from her last year, but I feel like it was towards the beginning of last year. Like it's just been a really long time since I've read any Tracie Peterson book, or at least any new Tracie Peterson book. So this is one of her newer series, something about Cheyenne Brides, maybe something about Cheyenne. I don't know. That's the series. I gave this one 4 stars, and it was good. It was definitely like a lot of Tracie Peterson's series can have a little bit of mystery to them, a little bit like of action, but this is definitely kind of a slower one. It was mainly about grief and learning to trust God through grief. So there's these 2 people, and they're really good friends. They've been friends for years. The main guy and the main girl have been friends for years. He had been married, but his wife, who was the main girl's best friend, passed away like 2 or 3 years ago, and the main girl and her father really helped him through his grief because their families were very close, and so he considers this girl like his best friend. And she has a younger sister who is like 18 years her junior or something like that. Like she's a half sister, so it was from her dad's second marriage, but her stepmother died during childbirth, so the main girl, and I forget their names, I don't know. The main girl, she's basically been raising this child who's like 3 now since birth. So she's like the only mother figure this child has ever known. So at the very beginning of the novel, her father passes away suddenly, like he's traveling during a storm and there's something happens, like, and the wagon goes off the road, and so it's an accident. It's very sudden. And so she and her young sister, who she's basically a mother to, are left alone, and their local pastor, who is like honestly a terrible person, is basically like, oh, well, you're a young single woman, so you can't care for this child, so I'm gonna take her and give her to a different family in the church. And she's like, I'm sorry, no, this is my child. My sister is basically my daughter. I've raised her since she was born. Like, you cannot take her away from me. And the pastor is like, well, I'll get a judge involved, and he'll say that you're unfit, and I will take this child and give her to somebody else who can better care for her. He's just like a terrible person. And she's like, so she gets really scared because she's like, they're going to take my sister away from me right after my father's died. And so our main guy, who's her friend, meanwhile, he gets a telegram from his old army superior saying that, because he's a police officer, and so he gets a old telegram from his army superior saying that they're looking for more law officers in Cheyenne, which is a new settlement at this point, and they want more law officers, but they also want more family men to settle the area. So would he and his wife come? Because his former superior doesn't know that his wife has passed away. So he goes to his friend and he's like, look, let's have a marriage of convenience, because if you're married to me, they can't take your sister away from you. And I need a wife to be a family man, to go be a sheriff or a deputy or whatever in Cheyenne. And so she agrees, and they go to Cheyenne together. And so, yeah, it goes from there. And it's just like, they're in this new Wild West town they don't know much about, and they're both grieving, and they're both in this marriage of convenience. And they got that line because they're like really, really good friends, so they don't want to cross that line and like complicate their marriage. But at the same time, like, it's yeah, I won't get into too much detail, but it was very good. It was kind of a slower moving novel, and there were some sad parts, also some happier parts. It was definitely a more serious novel, I would say. Like, I don't think I laughed very much, but it was still really good. It was very serious and somber in tone, but I did give it 4 stars. Okay, so next I read Meet Me in the Margin by Melissa Ferguson, which I gave 4 stars. I would definitely rate this as a clean fiction rather than a Christian fiction, despite being from a Christian publisher. I would call it clean because I don't think there was very much like Christianity or religion in it. But it was good. I gave it 4 stars. It was really cute, and it's set in a publishing house. So this girl, she's an editor, and she works for a publisher that's totally against like contemporary fiction and especially romance, but she writes romance. And so she leaves her manuscript in like this secret spot one day at work, and somebody finds it and starts editing it in the margins. And so they basically strike up a little secret editing tete-a-tete, and they don't really know who each other's are, but they're writing notes to each other and editing the manuscript in the margin. It's really cute. It's got some really cute moments. It didn't blow you away, but yeah, it's cute. It's light, and I love the publishing scene. It's where I've always wanted to work. Obviously, I don't work right now because of my chronic illness, and I don't know if I will ever be able to work a like regular 9-to-5 job, or if I do, when. But like when I was reading this book, like that takes place in the publishing house, and it's talking about the marketing and the editing, and like that's what I studied. I have a master's degree in publishing, and that's always where I wanted to be. Like I just felt like so. I kept reading it, and I was like, oh, this is where I've always been meant to be. And yeah, so it made me really happy. It made my little editor's heart really happy, and I just felt so drawn by the whole scene and everything. But yeah. Anyway, next I read the first and second book in the Three Sisters Island series by Suzanne Woods Fisher. So the first book is On a Summer's Tide, and the second book is On a Coastal Breeze. And I just finished these. I finished the second book like 2 days ago, so I haven't gotten a chance to get to the third book. And although I own the first 2 books, I don't own the third book, so I'm going to have to get it from the library, so I don't know when I'll be able to get it. Hopefully I'll get to that in May. Anyway, so I read the first 2 books. They each follow a sister, and so their dad, like, he basically sells his house and his possessions and uses the money to buy an old derelict camp on this remote island in Maine. And so his 3 daughters head out there to help him fix it up and get it ready for visitors, because he's going to turn it into like a vacation spot. And so the first book is about the oldest sister, Cam, and she has a son who she adopted from, when her best friend died. And so she's very career driven, very type A, and she didn't really expect to ever be a mother, but her best friend died, and she adopted her son, who she was very close to anyway, because her best friend was a single mother, and she basically helped her a lot with her son, whose name's Cooper. And so she's kind of in over her head a little bit with that, or she feels incompetent about it. And he has all sorts of anxiety and like abandonment issues, and it's a big thing. Then you have the middle sister, Maddie, who is a family counselor who also is racked with anxiety. And then you have the youngest sister, Blaine, who is in college and has no idea what she wants in life and can't stick to anything. And so they each kind of have their own problems, and so their dad is hoping that having them there together, they'll be able to work on their problems. And yeah, I don't want to spoil too much. I gave both books in the series 3 stars. I really, really wanted to like them, and some parts I did like. I did like the growth and the spiritual aspects to it. In the first book, I really hated Maddie, and I felt like she just kept doing stuff, especially in regards to Cooper, that I was like, this is so unhealthy, and what are you doing to this child? And that really got on my nerves. And I also didn't like, there was like a plot twist regarding the romantic hero in the book, and I just felt a little weirded out by it. So yeah, that's why I gave the first book 3 stars. And in the second book, I liked Maddie a lot better in the second book. She was the main character in the second book, and she didn't annoy me quite as much. I felt like we got a good glimpse of her. In the second book, I only gave 3 stars because I had a real problem with how chronic illness was portrayed in the second book. One of the characters, and I won't say who because I don't want to spoil it, he has a like chronic heart condition, but he's also like really, really into extreme sports and stuff, and he doesn't want to give them up because he doesn't want to like live in fear of his condition, which is totally fine. I totally get that. You should not live in fear of your chronic illness. Trust me, I know I have a chronic illness. But at the same time, he also like refused to seek any treatment or make any lifestyle changes to improve his chronic illness, because he said, he was like, oh, well, you know, God has our days numbered, and if I trust God and I don't fear death because I trust God, then I shouldn't have to change anything for my chronic illness. And like literally the doctors were telling him that like he could have something that could help save his life if something could like happen to his heart, and he refused it because he was like, look, God has my days numbered, and I don't have to fear this and all this stuff. And I was like, well, I just, as somebody with a chronic illness and a disability, I was like, that's a really problematic attitude to have, because yes, I 100% believe God has my days numbered, and I 100% believe that I do not have to fear my chronic illness and I can trust him. But at the same time, God has provided medical knowledge, and he has provided ways to make my life with a chronic illness the best that it can be. And just because like he is in control and has my days numbered does not mean that I should not seek treatment or seek lifestyle changes that make me a healthier person. Like, you don't tell somebody with cancer not to seek treatment because God has their days numbered. You don't get in a car every day and say, I don't have to wear my seatbelt because God has my days numbered, so I'm either going to die today or I'm not. Like, that's not something that you do. So why would you say, if you have a chronic illness, that you should treat it like it's nothing because, hey, God has your days numbered? Like, I don't know. As somebody with a chronic illness, and I'm sure that the author, I understand where the author was coming from. Like, she was trying to use this plot line to show how the main character who does have anxiety needed to let go of that. And the main character did need to let go of her anxiety. Like, I get that. But at the same time, like, and like, so I get where she was coming from. But at the same time, I just felt like that argument was really, really problematic. And as somebody with a chronic illness, I honestly felt a little diminished. Like I felt like people who live with issues like mine were just being basically like made light of, like, oh, well, you just need to, you know, not worry about it and live how you live and all this stuff. And I was like, this is a thing that impacts us. And while we should not fear it, it is good to make choices that can make you healthier and make your life better. And so I did not have a problem with him still doing extreme sports or anything like that, because I felt like if he was able to do that without too much issue, that's fine. But I did have a problem with him flat out refusing any sort of medical treatment or life changes to help his chronic illness, because he said that would somehow not be trusting God. Like, I felt like that was what it was implied. And I was like, no. God gives us knowledge about health and medicine in our bodies to help us, not to like test us to see if we'll trust him like blindly. Like, yes, we should trust him no matter what, trust him like a child would trust him. Like, but he gives us the gift of medical knowledge. Anyway, I've gone like way off course with that. But yeah, so I only gave that one 3 stars, and that was just one part of it, one small plot line. If that had been like a bigger plot line, like the main plot line, I probably would have given it less stars. But it was just one small plot line, and the rest of the book was really good. Like, that was the only thing I didn't like about it. So I did give it 3 stars. But yeah, like that part did really, really upset me. I have to be honest. So thank you for listening to my digression there. The next book I have, I'm actually really excited about. It was The British Booksellers by Kristy Cambron, which I've been excited about this book like since it was announced last fall. It was on my top 10 books anticipated to read in 2024. And it was good. I gave it 4 stars. So I was a little conflicted on this one because I would be reading through the book and at some parts it would be kind of slow and I'd be like, I don't know if I'd like this book that much. But then other parts it would pick up and I'd be like, oh, this is really, really good. And by the end of the book, I was really, really into it. And by the end of the book, I was like, oh, this could be like a 5-star read. But then I remember back to the beginning when I wasn't really into it and I was like, oh, well, maybe it's only 4 stars because it did take me a while to get into it. But like, I was really into it by the end, and I really, really enjoyed it by the end. It had some really good twists and turns. There was no sad endings in this one, so thank you, Kristy Cambron, because that's always something I'm worried about in her books. But yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. It's a dual timeline, so part of it is in World War I and part of it is in World War II. There's 2 romances, one in each timeline. And the second romance is like a second chance romance. And I won't get into too much into it because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, it's really good. There are bookstores. There's like it's about the Forgotten Blitz. So it's like the countryside blitz going on. It's based on true historical events. There's some intrigue. There's some like past trauma that has to be healed. There's a lot going on, but it's really, really good. And I gave it 4 stars and I would definitely recommend it. Okay. So the last book that I read, I think I hit everything. Yeah. The last book I read is another Erica Vetsch book, which I got from the library. And this is The Lost Lieutenant. It is the first book in a series that I do not know the name of. But I gave this one 4 stars as well. It was really, really good. So there's like this soldier and at the beginning of the novel, it takes place around 1811, 1812, during Britain's war with Napoleon. And so he wakes up in a hospital and he doesn't have any memories of how he was injured. He was injured in battle, but he has no memories of it, only what people have told him. And basically, it turns out that he saved the Prince Regent's godson during the battle. And so the Prince Regent, after he's healed and out of the hospital, calls him to court and makes him an earl as a reward for saving his godson's life. And he also decides that he should marry his goddaughter's, the sister of the guy who was saved. He's like, okay, yeah, I just complicated that. Let me simplify it. So the Prince Regent calls this army lieutenant, Evan, and he's like, thank you for saving my godson's life. As a reward, you get to be a new earl and you get to marry the sister of the guy whose life you saved, who is my goddaughter. And that's really simplified. This takes place over a couple of days, but to simplify it, the Prince Regent is basically like, here's a title, here's land, you're now a gentleman, and here's a girl to marry, please marry her. And so then we have this girl, Diana. She's in her very first season, and she just came out like 2 days before, and suddenly the Prince Regent, who is her godfather, she's the daughter of a duke, by the way. So suddenly the Prince Regent is like, guess what? You should marry this brand new earl. Marry him. And she's like, oh, okay, because you can't say no to the prince, right? And so they're like, okay, guess we're getting married now. So yeah, it's basically a marriage of convenience because the prince told them to marry and you don't say no to the prince. But there are also some other things going on. He can't remember the battle, but he can remember that there was something really important going on, that he had received some kind of information that was really urgent to get to his commanders. So he's really trying to remember the battle. He's also dealing with some PTSD, and so like certain sounds or smells will send him back to like the battle and to battles in his mind. And so, but he's really scared of it because like at this point in time, PTSD wasn't a thing, In World War II, they called it shell shock, but back here in the early 1800s, if, soldiers kind of exhibited these symptoms, then they were basically sent to a mental institute. So he's trying to keep that a secret, and he's trying to keep it a secret from her. And she has this thing going on. Her sister her older sister got pregnant out of wedlock and died in childbirth, and she wants to raise the baby as her own. And her father, who's the Duke, is really, really cruel, and he's constantly threatening to like send the baby to an orphanage if she doesn't do what he wants. And so when they get married, she has her maid pretend that the baby is hers and come with them to the new house. So she's keeping that secret. And they have this whole thing like, because the Prince Regent tells them that he wants to visit their new country estate in the spring. So they're like, okay, we have to go get it ready for him. But when they arrive there, because there hasn't been an earl on the land for 20 years, the house is just falling apart. It's awful. So they're like, okay, we only have 2 or 3 months to get this property ready for a prince's visit. So there's that going on. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle here, but they all fit together really nicely. It's all done really well, and I really enjoyed it. And I definitely look forward to reading more in the series when I can. Okay, so that was all 11 books that I read in April, and if you've read any of these books, let me know. Let me know what you read in April. I really want to hear about it. Thank you so much, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.